like to open the floor for comments, questions. Maybe we'll take a few and then allow each speaker about, I know we're very short of time, but concluding remarks of 2 minutes. We'll give Ibra the maximum time for concluding remarks, maybe 4 minutes. Are there any questions from the floor? And whoever has questions, if you could come to the podium so Ibra can also hear you in the Maldives. No questions? Do the panelists have questions? Devyani, if you could come here to ask the question. Even if you don't have any questions, but interventions, those would be welcome.
My question is to Mr. Abraham, if you can hear me clearly. He can. Yes. Yeah.
Ibra, you can hear us, right? You've muted your mic, if you could turn it on. Yeah.
So, past few months onwards, we see an increasing aggressive response from the government of Maldives to international community's responses to what's happening. Two examples to cite this. One is, of course, what was already mentioned, the action to the UPR process, what the foreign minister said. And a similar reaction was made when the EU Parliament passed a resolution raising concern about developments in Maldives, and the foreign minister made strong statements, also saying that I think Maldives' human rights records is better than many European countries. So, can you explain that a little bit? That to me seems surprising for a country that is actually so dependent on it's an import economy and heavily connected with international community. Can you explain this reaction? Why is this happening? And basically, I'm just a little surprised at the confidence of the government to do that. So can you explain that a little bit?
So the most of the time we discuss about the India's role and more responsibility, but there is no, people to people contact is fine, but what we can do more than China in Maldives? My second question is before Ambassador Sahadev sir. During coup and its trouble, we do not discuss the role of acting ambassadors and station officers. Sometimes we need to discuss about, because it happens because it may be wrong, but maybe because of lethargy or the inactiveness of acting ambassadors. So could you elaborate the role of ambassadors and station officers during trouble? Thank you.
Question is to Ibrahim ji.
Can you introduce yourself?
Vijay Pratap, live in Delhi, part of People's Heart. I was wondering the kind of judiciary's negative resilience to any democratic fair trial issues and the kind of political atmosphere. What is the maximum Indian civil society can do which will sustain the hope in Maldivian polity?
One last question, and then we'll give Ibrahim some time. Would you, one last question, and then we'll give Ibrahim some time to respond, and the other panelists as well.
Hi, I'm Avinash, I'm working with ActionAid, and my question for Sahadev sir. During coup time, I recall that India acted so swiftly, and during this, why we are very reluctant and we are not taking a proper step? Is there any motive, or is there something which is hindering India's move to protect democracy in Maldives? And there's the second question to Ibrahim sir, that the judiciary in Maldives is acting very negatively. I read that that petition which is filed to international court, and here what kind of constitutional rights are there to curtail this kind of thing, and what is the way forward you are thinking to mitigate this kind of things in future? That if you throw some light on that, thank you.
One more question? Just absolutely the last question. If you could come up very quickly so that we can... Last question.
I am Group Captain Ashok Chordia from the Center for Air Power Studies. I am doing a definitive study on Operation Cactus, Maldives. In 1988, when the coup took place, I was in the first aircraft which landed there to support the Gayoom government. My observation is that a country can intervene in the other country only at the request of the country, and we cannot. As a democratic country, we cannot enter the other country and respond to the requests of the people. Under the present circumstances, I don't think it will be possible for a country to intervene. Thank you.
First time there was an official request by the President of Maldives to the Indian government to come to the assistance of the then democratically elected, or the way democracy was defined at that time in Maldives, and we responded. But it's not boots on the ground, as the Americans call it, is not the only option for a state. There are many, many ways in which governments can influence events in areas of their interests. And I don't think I think we failed to use those options. It's not that the game is over, it will go on for some time. And I think this government has at least so far shown that they are willing to be a little more strict than the last government was. As to the role of the ambassador, I think you must remember that I was long retired, therefore not in the know of things, and sitting in India. I think I'm going to pass the buck here. Suman Chakravarti, who was very much on the ground, who was active, and whatever information I might have was basically from him. So I let him feel that. Okay.
Yeah, just very quickly to sort of re-emphasize, I think there needs to be a lot of international action and a lot of international attention on the deteriorating human rights situation. India, of course, because it is an important player, it has deep relations with the Maldives. Yesterday was a start at the Universal Periodic Review. India needs to use its bilateral ties, good offices, to re-emphasize and help create space for civil society, an independent judiciary, and basic political freedoms. But also the other players who've been mentioned, part of the international community. China has a growing clout. China needs to be supportive of this process. The European Union, the United States, SAARC countries as well, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, who have close ties with the Maldives. Because no one is talking about an intervention here, but we are talking about solidarity and continuing to support the civil political rights in the Maldives. So one can only hope that we do our part and the governments also put in their part to help the situation out.
Devani, you sure you don't? Okay, Dr. Sahu.
Regarding your question about China and how India can actually counter Chinese sort of capture of Maldives. It's very difficult in a sense that China is spread all across South Asia. In fact, that theory, string of pearls and whatever you believe, one country another, after another, it's been encircling, and probably it's in a greater design of sort of geopolitical reality. So you saw that in Sri Lanka and Maldives. But India has actually, when it comes to the question of democracy, India has actually a number of options. One is, of course, to internationalize this particular case, and India has been actively doing it, but in a more silent, very sort of manner, not to show any sort of sign that India is doing it very proactively with sort of eye-catching kind of work. But I can tell, at least with I was privy to a meeting last week in Brussels with some of those European Union external assistants. That they basically support democracy and human rights, this thing. So some of those officials were sharing that they have been planning and trying to persuade Maldives present regime to not become really repressive, and they're trying to restrain and also ensure that democratic process and other things also take through civil society and others. So there are all kind of actors who are doing, and India actually can make an impact with internationalizing this issue and bringing a very healthy collaboration with EU and America on this issue. So that way India can actually isolate China, because China is a kind of regime that doesn't actually see whether the cat is black or white, as long as it's able to catch the rat. So it's a pure sort of regime that actually goes with whatever its national interests. It doesn't really see the values, what we call democracy or human rights. So that is where I think India has to make a very careful sort of thing.
There was a question on what makes Maldives so confident. Why are they so brazen about their human rights, etc. Actually, Maldives is just $2 to $3 billion economy, and 30% of it comes from tourism, and 50% of the tourists are Chinese. So, and when Xi Jinping was in Malé, he said, "Don't worry, whatever facility you have, we will fill it up." So that's where the confidence comes from. Thank you.
Last remarks from Shuman.
Well, the cat is black or white as long as it catches the rat is fine. But who exactly will bell the cat is the big question. Because I'll tell you, somebody told me China, you were talking about China, and I think I missed out on that point. Because China today is openly wooing. You say the Chinese tourists are coming, but they're just coming for the last 4 years. Before that, there were no Chinese, soul on that shores of the Indian Ocean. They didn't know about Maldives, as we also did not, mostly. So what China is doing right now, they're no longer covert. They're openly wooing. But in the 1990s, Gayoom had come to a secret defense agreement with the Chinese to provide an entire island for a submarine base in return for enhanced arms supplies to the Maldivian army. After all that, so-called friendship and 21-hour long phone calls and, going there to save Gayoom's government, the dictatorship, and all of that we did. Gayoom was doing this, but then the Chinese could not trust him. Finally, they could not trust him, and that's why they did not finally go ahead with that agreement. But there was a process which was started. Number two, what they're doing right now is completely different. They're openly doing things. What India has not done. India talks about giving money to their GDP to support their budget, but we don't do anything which is, because perception rules the world today, and we are not doing anything that is perceptive. They have built your museum there. The Chinese have built a huge museum which is so beautiful, They have aided your biggest mosque. They have done everything which you can see. It's right in there in front of your eyes. And we are not doing anything that can tell the Maldivians that India is the closest nation, India is your friend, New Delhi will always stand up to you. We are not doing anything perceptive, and if packaging, call it packaging, but the world has moved along, and we need that visual show of support to Maldivians for them to understand that India still exists. India still has a stance in Maldives. Only a week before he was ousted in 2012, I can tell you this story, that Nasheed was being pushed by one of his top officers in the armed forces to sign a defense agreement with China. He steadfastly refused, and he has been refusing for 3 months. I have been privy to telephone conversations with his ministers, where the Chinese CEO of the Chinese National Bank, I think, called him up just before, a week before the visit of Nasheed's couple of ministers to China as part of a diplomatic process, and said, just tell us what you need. They were giving them a blank check. They were saying, what do you need? We are ready to pay you. India never did anything of that sort. Having said that, in the past, as I said, during Manmohan Singh's regime, we lost not just our marbles in diplomatic engagement, but friends in the process. We lost our credibility, and with a history of dumping friends, particularly in that era, from Maldives to Bangladesh to Burma, the reality was stark. We, as I said before, when we failed to back the democratic dreams of the Maldivian public, it was very clear that our foreign policy was somewhat at a loss. And Maldives needed your support at that time. When we deterred, as a coup d'etat forced the first democratic president, all the ghosts of the past came crawling out of the cupboard. And they came crawling out because, and I insist, because there's an article in one of the most, I think, respected columnists from Maldives, Azra Naseem, who also is now in exile, mostly because she can't come back to the country. So she wrote this in Guardian, and I think she said very clearly that she explained it, why that $800 million scam was responsible. Remember this, we talk about the tortures during Gayoom's regime. Remember that we have to talk about the corruption also in Gayoom's regime, because very conveniently we have forgotten that. And Nasheed needs to take a lot of blame for that. He showed a lot of grace. He talked about reconciliation when people had told him very clearly, reconciliation is fine, but there has to be a political reconciliation. You cannot give a blank check of reconciliation. And what happened as a result is that all these forces always remained in power behind his back. Democracy was never truly established in Maldives, and this time something needs to give. It will be this way because Maldives, the democracy part of Maldives, the people who love democracy in the Maldives, they are losing out. They are losing hope. They might be out on the streets, but believe you me, they need support. And this is the time for the world to show support, and definitely for New Delhi to show support. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
And the call that Ibra is giving out to the Indian civil society to support them in their hour of crisis, we hope from the People's SARC that we may be able to act a little bit on this, and in future deepen our links with the civil society in the Maldives. Ibra and I have been talking about that all day today. We hope to be able to act on that. I thank you all once again, and especially the speakers. Thank you. आधा घंटा हमारे साथ